Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's jump right into it. Today we're exploring a timeless piece of Hindi folklore known as Jadui Matka, or the magical pot. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but don't let the fairy tale premise fool you. We aren't just looking at a simple children's bedtime story today. Actually, we're unpacking a fascinating centuries-old case study. It's a story that pushes the absolute extreme boundaries of poverty, our very human susceptibility to temptation, and the incredible exponential multiplier effect of our choices. It's really a masterclass in human psychology wrapped up in a myth, and it perfectly illustrates the ultimate clash between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset.
So, before we get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to throw a question your way. Picture this. What would you put into a magical pot that instantly multiplies anything placed inside it by exactly 100? It's a pretty fun thought experiment, right? I mean, most of us would immediately picture tossing in a $20 bill or maybe a piece of gold to see what happens. But I gotta warn you, in the source material we're unpacking today, the wrong answer to this exact question spirals wildly out of control, and honestly, it nearly destroys an entire village.
Part 1. The Orphan's Daily Struggle. Okay, to understand how things go so incredibly wrong, we first have to meet our protagonist. Our story begins in the village of Rampur, with a destitute orphan named Kesu. Kesu lives in this broken-down hut right on the edge of town, and his daily survival completely depends on herding cattle for the village's headman, the Mukhia. And the Mukhia, he's a cruel and immensely wealthy man. In exchange for all this exhausting labor, Kesu gets basically nothing, just a couple of pieces of dry roti. But one terrifying night changes everything. A violent rainstorm hits Rampur, and the Mukhia's absolute prized cow, Lali, goes missing. The headman threatens to literally banish Kesu and tear down his hut if he doesn't find her. So forced into the dangerous pitch-black forest, Kesu is desperately seeking shelter when he stumbles into a forbidden, glowing cave. Inside, resting on this ancient stone platform, he discovers a strange, glowing brass pot. Oh, and he also finds something else, the cow, totally safe.
So, bringing the pot home, Kesu decides to test it out. And this brilliantly illustrates the real magic of our story. He has literally nothing but one tiny piece of dry roti left to his name. He drops it into the pot, and instantly the pot glows blue. That single piece of dry bread miraculously multiplies into exactly 100 fresh, steaming hot rotis. Now, what does Kesu do with this insane windfall? He doesn't hoard it. Operating from a mindset of total abundance, despite his own extreme poverty, he eats his fill and then immediately goes out into his neighborhood to feed all the starving children who usually go to bed with empty stomachs.
Part 2. The Headman's Greed.
But, as you might guess, no good deed goes unnoticed, especially by those looking to exploit it. The Mukhia's servant, Ramu, had been sneaking around spying on Kesu. He witnesses this bread miracle and immediately runs to tattle to the headman. So the very next morning, the Mukhia marches right up to Kesu's hut with his men and completely confiscates the pot. His excuse? He claims that since Kesu lives on village land, anything found in the forest automatically belongs to the headman. Notice the stark psychological contrast here. We have the exact same magic, but two completely different applications. Kesu used a dry piece of bread to feed hungry kids. The Mukhia, driven entirely by a scarcity mindset despite having insane wealth, steals the pot and immediately starts scheming to multiply his jewelry and gold coins.
See, the Mukhia was just entirely blinded by his ambition. When Kesu first found the pot in that cave, a divine echoing voice had explicitly warned him, saying, "Remember, greed is man's biggest enemy." Kesu heard this, understood it, and totally respected it. The Mukhia, however, he completely ignores Kesu's warnings about the voice. He just dismisses Kesu as a foolish beggar and rushes back to his grand palace, laser-focused on becoming the wealthiest man alive.
Part 3. 100 Greedy Clones.
And that blinding ignorance, it sets the stage for absolute disaster. Let's look at the rapid, kind of hilarious escalation of the Mukhia's actions here. Step 1. Back in his palace, the Mukhia drops his last gold coin into the pot. Boom, immediately coins pour out. Step 2. Completely drunk on the magic, he orders his servant to throw in every piece of silk, every jewel, literally every valuable item in the house. The room quickly fills up with these mountains of treasure. But then comes step 3. In his frantic, blinded excitement to hoard even more wealth, the headman loses his footing. He slips, and in a moment of absolute, comical irony, he falls headfirst directly into the magical pot. Now remember our magic multiplier? 100. Because the Mukhia fell into the pot, the magic applied directly to him.
Within seconds, 100 identical, equally greedy headmen emerge from the brass pot. And here's the kicker. Because they share the exact same greedy personality, they instantly turn on each other. They start violently fighting, pulling hair, throwing punches, just completely tearing the palace apart, with each individual clone screaming that he is the true owner of the treasure. It perfectly highlights how unchecked greed inherently divides and destroys. All that wealth they just generated, entirely forgotten in their desperate battle for total dominance.
It is absolute chaos, and it brings up a terrifying problem. How on earth do you stop unstoppable magic? These 100 violent clones are right on the verge of spilling out of the palace doors and destroying the entire village of Rampur. If you were in Kesu's shoes, just standing there watching the man who ruthlessly oppressed you destroy himself, what would you do?
Part 4. The Ultimate Sacrifice.
Well, while the clones are busy tearing the palace down to the studs, Kesu realizes he's the only one who can actually fix this. He sprints all the way back into the dark, dangerous forest, straight to the glowing cave, begging the divine power to stop the magic and save his village. The divine voice does answer him, but it lays out some incredibly heavy conditions to stop the chaos. The voice tells Kesu he must break the magical pot with a special divine stick. If he does this, the fake headman and all the gold will just vanish into thin air. But, and this is absolutely crucial, Kesu will also lose his magical food source. He has to willingly give up his only means of comfort and return to a life of extreme, grueling poverty. And without even a second thought, Kesu agrees. He just accepts the burden to protect his neighbors.
Armed with the glowing magic stick, Kesu runs back into the chaotic palace. Dodging these wildly fighting clones, he strikes the brass pot with all his might. There's a massive, explosive flash of light. And just like that, Kesu shatters the pot. Instantly, the mountains of gold, the piles of silk, and the 100 screaming clones just vanish into smoke. All that remains is the original, real Mukia, sitting right there in the ruins of his own greed, completely humbled and totally stripped of his arrogance.
Part 5. The True Meaning of Magic. With a massive crisis finally averted, the Mukia falls to his knees, begging for forgiveness and promising to literally never oppress the poor again. Kesu forgives him, turns around, and starts heading back to his ruined hut to start collecting firewood again, fully content with his choice. But suddenly, the divine voice echoes around him once more, though this time it's warm and gentle. The voice reveals the ultimate truth of the story. Selfless service and honesty is the greatest magic. The pot, the voice explains, was never just a tool. It was a test of greed, and Kesu passed it brilliantly by choosing the well-being of his village over his own personal comfort.
And because Kesu proved his incredible character, the divine power decides he doesn't actually need a pot anymore. The magic multiplier is instead transferred directly into Kesu's own hands and his hard work. It's amazing! Every seed Kesu plants now yields 100 times the normal harvest. Sick animals he touches are instantly healed. Through his newly empowered labor, he naturally becomes a wealthy and deeply respected farmer. And, completely true to his nature, he uses his new wealth to open a massive village soup kitchen, ensuring that no one in Rampur ever goes hungry again.
So, what is the core moral we can really extract from this folklore? The story sets up a super powerful paradigm. Greed is depicted as a pot that can never, ever be filled. Literally, no matter how much gold or silk you pour into it, it only creates chaos and destruction. Satisfaction and selflessness, on the other hand, are framed as a treasure that never empties. Kesu's internal contentment and his abundance mindset allowed him to unlock a sustainable, true wealth that uplifted literally everyone around him.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. I want to leave you with a provocative thought directly inspired by Kesu's journey. If your actions today were multiplied by 100, would you choose to multiply your possessions or your impact on others? The magic of the brass pot might just be an old myth, but the multiplier effect of our daily choices, that is very, very real. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating story, and I highly encourage you to